They were told it was harmless. In fact, they were told it was healthy. So they painted it onto their skin, their clothes, even their teeth. And at night, their bodies glowed in the dark. But years later, their teeth began falling out. Their bones started breaking. And slowly, their bodies began collapsing from the inside. They became known as the Radium Girls. And their story exposed one of the most horrifying corporate scandals in history. It was the early 1900s. Factories across America hired young women to paint watch dials with a special glowing substance, radium. At the time, radium was considered almost magical. People believed it had health benefits. It appeared in cosmetics, medicine, toothpaste, even drinking products. And because the glowing paint required precision, young women became the preferred workers. The job looked ideal. Clean work, good pay, modern technology. Many workers felt lucky to be there. Inside the factories, the women painted tiny numbers onto watches and military instruments. The glowing dials became famous, especially during World War I, and nobody warned the workers that every brushstroke was poisoning them. To paint the tiny watch numbers accurately, workers used a technique called lip dip paint. They shaped the brush tip with their lips, then dipped it into radium paint, then painted again, over and over and over. Every single day, they swallowed tiny amounts of radioactive material. The companies reassured them constantly. Managers claimed the paint was perfectly safe. Ironically, many scientists working with radium inside the same factories wore protective gear. But the women painting the dials, they were given none. Some workers even painted their fingernails and teeth with radium for fun. At night, their clothes and skin glowed faintly in the dark. At first, it felt magical. Then the symptoms began. The first signs seemed small: toothaches, fatigue, weakness. But then something terrifying started happening. Their jaws began rotting. Teeth loosened and fell out. Bones became fragile. Some women suffered fractures just from walking. Others developed massive infections that destroyed parts of their faces. Doctors were horrified. One dentist reportedly described jawbones literally crumbling apart during examination. Because radium doesn't simply pass through the body, it behaves like calcium. The body stores it inside the bones, where it continues releasing radiation for years, slowly, silently, destroying tissue from the inside. Some victims allegedly glowed faintly in darkness due to radioactive contamination, and many of the women died in agony while still incredibly young. The companies knew something was wrong, but instead of warning workers, many tried to protect themselves. Reports were hidden. Doctors were pressured. Some medical records were manipulated to avoid linking the deaths to radium exposure. In certain cases, the women themselves were blamed, accused of having unrelated diseases. Meanwhile, more workers became sick. More died. But a few women refused to stay silent. Even while suffering severe illness, they fought back. They sued the companies responsible. At the time, this was almost unthinkable. Young factory workers challenging powerful corporations in court. And despite their failing health, they kept fighting because they wanted the truth exposed. Eventually, the Radium Girls won. Not completely, not easily, but enough to change history forever. Their cases exposed the dangers of radiation and forced major changes in worker protection laws. Companies could no longer ignore workplace safety so easily. The tragedy also transformed industrial health standards across America, because before the Radium Girls, many workers had almost no legal protection at all. Their suffering became a turning point, a warning written in radiation and human pain. And even today, their story remains one of the clearest examples of what happens when profit becomes more important than human life. In the end, the Radium Girls didn't just expose dangerous products, they exposed dangerous greed, because the companies knew the risks, and still, they allowed the poisoning to continue. Today, their story survives as both a tragedy and a warning. Sometimes, the deadliest things in history were once sold as miracles.